Hey, I'm Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. Today I'm doing an Edgar Wright tier list. I've done tier lists for numerous filmmakers at this point, so just check the description for a playlist of all of my tier lists. Edgar Wright is a filmmaker that I love. He doesn't have the biggest filmography. You can see he has 7 titles here, 6 movies and 1 TV show. This isn't everything he's done, but it's pretty close. He's got that old Western thing, which is pretty hard to track down. He has a TV show called Asylum, which I have seen most of. I'm not including in this tier list, but I think it's kind of okay. It doesn't like wow me, but it's whatever. He also has that Sparks Brothers documentary. That is not in this ranking either, but pretty much everything else he's done is here. Oh, also he did one of the fake trailers in Grindhouse. He did the Don't trailer, which is a lot of fun. That's one of the better trailers out of the fake trailers, which are all pretty fun. So that's a really good one too. But we're gonna be looking at this little pool of movies here, which are in a randomized order. Shaun of the Dead is up first. This is probably the movie that most people first became familiar with him from. You could call it a zombie parody, but I think with this Cornetto trilogy, which is kind of the official, unofficial name for that trilogy of Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Edgar Wright movies, is the Cornetto trilogy. With the Cornetto trilogy, you could kind of call all of them parody movies. Some people do call them that. I don't know if I would call them that. I know that Edgar Wright has kind of resisted that label. They're not like making fun of the genre. It's more like an homage, a send-up. It's his entry in that genre while making it comedic, but not like making fun of it. Like, he's not making fun of zombie movies. It's like a serious zombie movie that has a ton of humor in it and is hilarious. But the actual like zombie story is a good dramatic story. It's cohesive. It's not like Scary Movie, where everything's just a farce and there's no like stakes to anything. It's all just over the top craziness. There's stakes to the story. The characters are dimensional. You care about these characters. You care about the titular Shaun. You care about Ed. You care about all the friends in his orbit. You care about Liz, but also Liz's friends. I love the cast of this movie. It's a great cast. Like, needless to say, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are excellent together. But also like Dylan Moran in a big supporting role. If you've only seen Shaun of the Dead, you're not familiar with Dylan Moran's other work, you might have no idea that guy is a like top-notch stand-up comedian. He also helmed his own sitcom for a time called Black Books, which is absolutely hilarious. Or at least, I haven't seen it in a while. I do remember it getting a little weaker towards the end of Black Books, but starting unbelievably strong. Anyway, Dylan Moran is great. He is more of a straight man on this than you might expect, considering like his stand-up, he plays like a drunk kind of persona, which is really funny, but he's not doing that in this. He also acts with Simon Pegg in the movie Run, Fat Boy, Run, but that one does not have any Edgar Wright involvement. It isn't great. It's not bad though. Has a really great stair fall. I remember that. Sure, that is great. It's a great zombie movie. Even if this is kind of like a litmus test for a lot of like genre comedies, is if you ripped all of the comedy out of the movie, which is like a ridiculous hypothetical, obviously that wouldn't happen, but if you did rip all the humor out of the movie, it would still be a really good zombie movie, which is the mark of a great comedy where, obviously when you put in the humor, it all gets that much better. But like, great gore effects. George A. Romero, who is obviously like the king of zombie movies, he enjoyed this movie enough that he gave the Cornetto fellas a cameo in Land of the Dead when he made Land of the Dead after Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is great. I think it gets the S tier, honestly. I think it goes all the way up there. Really, really good. Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim is one of those movies that was kind of a failure upon release somehow. It's one of those movies where it's like, how the hell was this a box office bomb? It was a complete failure, but it's one of those movies that like everybody has come around on. And it seemed like everyone came around on it immediately. It was like people were it was like everyone was calling it underrated even as it was failing in the box office. It's really good. I think it's one of Michael Cera's best roles. It's really funny. Edgar Wright's direction is like crispy. It's him in top form with all the, like every scene has this perfect transition. All the humor is like accompanied perfectly with like a little visual flourish. It doesn't need to be in there necessarily for like a lot of the jokes. Kieran Culkin is so funny in this as Wallace, the titular character's roommate. He is so funny in this. This is the movie that made me a full-blown Kieran Culkin fan. That guy's hilarious. And then I'm so glad he's getting his due now with Succession. That's such a great role for him, and now everyone is giving him all the love that he deserves. But the cast all the way around is really good. Chris Evans, pre-Captain America, is in this, and he's great. He's the skateboarding one, which a lot of people probably don't even remember that was him. Alison Pill is good in her role. Aubrey Plaza is a kind of a small role in this, and she's really good. Anna Kendrick is in this. You forget how wild the cast of this thing is. And that's what they've been getting into. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who was excellent in this, and she became, I would say, a much bigger star after this. The action is really good in Scott Pilgrim, which sticks out in a notable way because I have some criticisms about the action in some of Edgar Wright's other projects. But not in Scott Pilgrim. The action is really good, especially because it's such a stylized version of action. It's a type of action that isn't even really, it's not really my preferred type of action. They're really heavily stylized, lots of VFX, lots of crazy movement and impossible physics and stuff. Edgar Wright leans so thoroughly into that style. He just owns it, and he makes it work really well. His direction really shines in this one. The music's great too, not to mention this is kind of a musical. There's lots of original music in it. Yeah, it's just good all around. I don't think I would go all the way to S with it, but I would go to A with it. Okay, next up is Spaced. Spaced was a TV show that Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost all made together before they made Shaun of the Dead. This is the precursor to the Cornetto trilogy. They had also worked on that Asylum show together, or at least Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg did. I don't remember if Nick Frost is in that. He might not have been. In Spaced, it's interesting to watch and compare to the Cornetto trilogy because they didn't have Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as the duo yet. I think they didn't know that their chemistry was so perfect together as a duo. They're both in it. They have lots of scenes together, of course, but Simon Pegg and Jessica Hines are kind of the main duo of this. But the whole cast is really good. This show is so creative, and you can kind of see it as a roadmap for Edgar Wright's career. There is an episode that is about, there's a zombie episode of Spaced, even though it's a show that has nothing to do with zombies. It's there's lots of video game and movie references and stuff in Spaced. And so they have a zombie episode, or at least a zombie sequence. Maybe it's not quite a whole episode, but there's a zombie sequence where Simon Pegg is shooting zombies with a shotgun and stuff. And the way that they justify it in the show is he's playing, I think, the first Resident Evil game on PlayStation 1, and then he has a fantasy sequence where he's shooting zombies. But it's a direct precursor to Shaun of the Dead, and you can see other examples of that throughout Spaced, of Edgar Wright playing around with ideas that he would then blow up into features later on in his career. Just really good stuff. It's a great television series. It didn't run for too long, as is often the case with British comedies. They don't stick around as long as U.S. television shows, which I don't know, I kind of think it's kind of for the better. It allows the episodes to be really refined, and each one can be a perfect little jewel of an episode, as opposed to U.S. television shows are often scattershot. You have some good episodes, some bad episodes, UK TV shows, they don't outstay their welcome. I wouldn't go all the way to S with it. It's either B or A. I think I could go to A with it. Now you gotta keep in mind, it is a TV show versus a movie, and as a TV show made in the 90s or whatever, it does have a substantially lower budget, so there are maybe some ways where it feels a little bit constrained by its form and by its finances. But I think it mostly transcends all those trappings. Oh, and also, Jessica Hines from Spaced, it's an extra fun little cameo when she shows up in Shaun of the Dead. The leader of that other group is Jessica Hines, which is kind of an extra meta reference for people who have seen Spaced to go, oh look, it's the two space people meeting up, and then they mirror each other in that way. The World's End is the end of the Cornetto trilogy. I don't know if Edgar Wright will do another movie with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. I kind of hope they do, because I think they're at their best when those three are working together. Edgar Wright's movies, without them, have felt like they're missing a little something. Not really, just a tiny bit, The World's End, I don't think is as good as the other two entries in the Cornetto trilogy, which kind of foreshadows what I think about Hot Fuzz. I think The World's End is the weakest of the three. I don't think it's substantially weaker, but it is noticeably weaker. It isn't firing on quite as many cylinders in the script department. I would say directorially, it is like right up there. It might even be the smoothest, the cleanest directorially of Edgar Wright's movies. So it's there in that department. I think it's, and I don't want to make it sound like the story is weak, because it isn't. There's some great character writing going on. Like the whole backstory with Simon Pegg's character and the way that it's kind of like teased but then ultimately revealed. I think that works extremely well, and it gets effectively emotional in a way and at a moment where you don't really expect it. I also kind of liked that they did a little bit of role reversal with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in this one after Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, whereas in both of those, Simon Pegg is the straight man and Nick Frost is the goofier one. I appreciate that in The World's End, they reverse it more, where now Nick Frost is the straight man and Simon Pegg is the goofier, more exaggerated, over-the-top character. I think it's cool to see them both flex their range a little bit. I love Paddy Considine. If you've seen my Tyrannosaur video essay, you know that I've gushed about that movie, which he directed and wrote. He's not in it as an actor, but he's a great actor as well. He's really good in this. He has a much smaller role in Hot Fuzz, but he's still funny. He's one of the two Andys, the mustache cop, and he gives great performances in plenty of other movies. He's a big deal now on House of Dragon. He's like the Targaryen king or whatever on that. So that's a cool big role for him. And he was in great performance early in his career was Dead Man's Shoes. I don't love that movie as much as some people do, but I do think his performance is unbelievably good in that. Anyway, so he's really good. Martin Freeman, of course, is really good in it. Rosamund Pike is good, of course, but I don't think she's as funny as like Jessica Hines, for example. Good actor. I don't know, she doesn't seem to be the best at humor. Her character, some of her jokes fall a little flat. I don't know if that's necessarily on her. It could be the writing's a little weaker for her character, because the writing definitely seems to be worse for the women characters in Edgar Wright's filmography, if you look at Last Night in Soho in particular, but we'll get to that a little bit later on, I guess. Bill Nighy's really good as the voice of the aliens. He was in Shaun of the Dead, of course, as the stepfather. Pierce Brosnan's in this in a small role, which is a fun surprise. Michael Smiley's in this, and I always love seeing Michael Smiley because he's great. He was in Spaced as the character Tyres, who's a really fun character, and Tyres shows up in Shaun of the Dead. Actually, I think he's only in a deleted scene. There's a lot of action in this movie. It's like almost a kung fu movie because the fight scenes are very martial arts inspired. And I will say, it feels a little weird that the fights are all like martial artsy because of who the characters are. None of these characters seem like they would fight this way. It kind of hurts my immersion a little bit. I'm a huge kung fu fan. If you've been around this channel, I talk about kung fu movies all the time. I absolutely love them. But these characters, it doesn't make sense for them to be fighting in this way. And that throws me off. There's a bit that I love where they straight up take a bit of choreo from Legend of the Drunken Master. They take a Jackie Chan little fight exchange and they plop that into the middle of, I think it's in the bathroom fight scene, or it's in one of the fight scenes with Simon Pegg. And it's a perfect fit because this movie's all about drinking and alcohol and stuff. So it's a great fit in that regard. That works for me. A lot of the other fighting where they're doing like kung fu moves and stuff, or where they're doing like martial arts style fighting, it's like I just don't really buy these characters doing it. And also, it pains me to point it out a little bit, but like, you can just kind of tell that the cast are doing a lot of their own fighting, which is commendable, but you have the downside of like part of the reason why you don't have actors doing their own action a lot of times isn't just because like they don't want to or whatever, it's because they aren't able to. And it's not to say that these guys aren't able to do the fighting. It's like they get the job done, kind of, but you can tell that they haven't been through like, for example, they haven't been through the level of fight training that Keanu Reeves goes through for the John Wick movies, let's just say. They aren't John Wick level badasses. They look like they're struggling with the moves a little bit. Some of the hits they don't sell perfectly. This is maybe a quibble that like only bothers me and doesn't affect other people, possibly, like as a big martial arts fan. I don't know. And they do a pretty good job. It's not bad, it's just like it does stick out to me in a not great way. The rules on like how strong the alien bodies seem to fluctuate to a degree that is a little inconsistent to me. Like what will demolish their head into a million pieces and what won't is a little all over the place. I don't know. Maybe it's getting a little nitpicky, I don't know. But these things do kind of stick out to me and they do add up a little bit. It's part of what hurts it a little bit. I will also say the story, I think the characters are really good, the main characters, but I do think the story could use a little more tightening. It feels to lack a little bit of that tightness that the other Cornetto movies have. For me, The World's End is a B, I think. Still really, really good. I've still watched it several times, and I think it's great. Okay, Last Night in Soho. This is the only one of Edgar Wright's movies that didn't really work for me. I had high hopes for Last Night in Soho. Maybe my expectations were just too high. I was so excited to see Edgar Wright do a full-blown horror movie, horror thriller kind of thing. He's very much working in the giallo territory, except only kind of. He's working in Dario Argento territory, I should say. It's not really a giallo, because giallos, it actually isn't really a giallo at all. It's just Dario Argento, and people tend to make a false equivalency between Dario Argento and the giallo genre, because he did some giallos. It's very much Suspiria, which is actually not a giallo at all, because giallos are not supernatural, usually. Actually, I think by rule they can't be supernatural. It has to be a human killer. It doesn't have the black gloves and all that. It's very much Suspiria. It's very Suspiria, and it's very old school Roman Polanski. Like it's a lot like The Tenet and Repulsion, those two in particular. A little bit of Rosemary's Baby too. I don't want to linger too long on the negatives because I really do love Edgar Wright, and I think this is a valiant effort. It does a lot of things really well. And I do think his direction is incredible. Like the way that he is orchestrating these shots and planning out these sequences, all this stuff with the reflections and like all the mirrors and stuff, and all these switches between Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, who I love both those actors, by the way. They're both great. I became a big fan of Thomasin McKenzie from her role in Leave No Trace with Ben Foster. I thought she was great in that and really stood out in a good way there. And she's been getting more and more big roles lately, which is really cool to see. She had like a couple of years there where it felt like she wasn't getting good roles, and then Last Night in Soho obviously was a big bump. And then I think she was in that old movie, the M. Night movie, which I really have no interest in seeing that one, so I didn't see it. But I'm glad to see her getting big roles regardless. And Anya Taylor-Joy, of course, is great. She left a big impression in The Witch, and then she had like Split. She was good in that. She's really good in The Northman recently. I do think though that their characters are a little underwritten. The characters fall a little flat. I think most of my issues with this movie, actually scratch it, I think all of my issues with this movie are in the script. I think as far as the production goes, fantastic, immaculately produced, right? As far as Edgar Wright's direction goes, fantastic, really impressive all around. But it's the script where things fall apart. It is not scary. I didn't feel any tension. There are sequences in this movie that I don't really think should be in here. Like the whole her getting drugged at the party, that doesn't really work for me in terms of what they're trying to do with it. The friend character who's in like fashion design class with her, the male that she has like kind of a romance with, and he's like there at the fire at the end and all that. That character is so ridiculously underwritten. The actor's doing what he can, but there's like nothing to that character. He feels like such a blank slate who's just there for like plot reasons, you know? And I'd say that about like the bully character too. The characters all feel really flat to me, and the script is weak. It relies way too heavily on those like ghost people, the way she looks out and sees like all the pedestrians and whatnot as these ghost faces. That is just not scary, and it's something we've like seen over and over again in movies. In this movie, Last Night in Soho just shoves it in your face constantly. There's just a lot about this one that didn't work for me on a script and story level. I don't know. I'll give it another shot at some point, and maybe I'll like it a little more, because I will admit my expectations are really high for it as a big Edgar Wright fan. Excited to see him like fully dive into the horror genre. And I'm not saying that like humor would have made this better. It doesn't really have. There's maybe a couple jokes, but it's not really it's not a comedy in the way that Shaun of the Dead is a horror movie and a comedy. This one's trying to be straight up horror thriller. And I don't think it really worked. I'm going to still give it a C, though, for all the things that it does really well. Right? Its direction, like visually, it looks great. I mean, I've already sung its praises. There is a lot to commend about it. It just doesn't work for me in one really huge key area, which is kind of like multiple key areas. It's, you know, script, story, character. Those elements just, they don't really work for me, unfortunately. Okay, next up is Baby Driver. This felt like a big change of pace for Edgar Wright. I guess Scott Pilgrim was kind of the big change of pace before then, as far as him working like outside of the UK. But Scott Pilgrim's still very funny. It's very comedy first and foremost, and very much in his style. Baby Driver feels like more of a departure. Greg and I reviewed Baby Driver back when it first came out, so if you want to see, actually reviewed it before it came out, we got an early screening to it. If you want to hear my full thoughts on Baby Driver, you can go check out that review. I like this movie a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. I've rewatched it since, and there were a couple other things that jumped out to me on subsequent watches. Let me just say, it wasn't a movie that got better on rewatch. It was a movie that actually weakened a tiny bit on rewatch. It has such a good soundtrack, but more important than just the songs that are picked, it's the way that the songs are used, the way that Edgar Wright shoots and edits to the music it's such a novel integration of music. The car chases are really good. I talked about them, I kind of criticized them a little bit in my car chase video essay. I still said I think they're really good, but I do have a couple issues with them that I haven't really seen anyone else hit on. Everyone else seems to just blanketly praise them. I have a couple issues with the car chases, which I would say watch my car chase video essay to hear what those issues are. And I do think, as much as I love the way he uses music, I do think that it hurts the action a little bit. Not as much the car chases, but like the shootout that happens, I think really suffers from the music because it doesn't really feel like a shootout. It feels like a music video. It feels like a trailer to a shootout rather than a shootout because it's way too like chopped up and there's like bits taken out of it that need to be in there for a shootout to be effective, I think. The ending action sequence also doesn't really work for me in the parking garage with John Hamm and all that. It doesn't work so great for me. The parkour chase I think is really fun and it's really well executed, but it's kind of a similar case with The World's End where like I don't really buy that these guys would be doing martial arts moves. I kind of don't buy that Baby Driver is like also a parkour expert. But I don't know, maybe that's another kind of minor thing. Kevin Spacey was outed as the crazy freak that he is like immediately after this movie came out, which I think was kind of unfortunate for Edgar Wright. Like I'm sure he wouldn't have cast Spacey if those allegations had come out like a year earlier or whatever. Maybe he still might have, I don't know. I don't know Edgar Wright's philosophy on that kind of thing. I think Ansel Elgort also had allegations come out about him after the fact, so yeah, the cast is kind of dwindling as far as like likable people go. John Bernthal is fun in it in his early role. He feels like a character that should come back in the plot, but he doesn't. That's kind of a weird writing thing. Jamie Foxx seems to be doing the exact same character that he played in Horrible Bosses, if you saw either of those movies. His Motherfucker Jones character is basically the same character, which is a little weird. Elia Gonzalez, I think is her name. She doesn't leave much of an impression. And John Hamm, I think, is a little underdeveloped for who he turns out to be in his like position in the movie. The two of them are they're like the romantic duo, and both of them feel a little underdeveloped to me. I would say the same about Baby's like foster father or adoptive father or whatever. He feels like he needs more screen time and more development. I do like what's in there with him. There's a sweetness to their relationship, but it feels like it doesn't get enough screen time for what it's supposed to mean for the character. And I would say that about some other elements of the script as well. I just feel like the script is lacking a little bit of refinement. It's better than Last Night in Soho. I think it's another B for me. There's a lot that's really great about it, and then a few shortcomings. And last, Hot Fuzz. I'm glad that I got to end on a positive one that I can just gush about. I'm going to give Hot Fuzz an S tier. I think it is actually my favorite of his movies. I think I like it even more than Shaun of the Dead. The cast is just so good. I've kind of already talked about the whole cast because I didn't mention Jim Broadbent, who's fucking great. Jim Broadbent is a guy who I've only ever seen in dramas outside of this, but he's really funny. Timothy Dalton is so fucking funny. What an outside the box casting pick. You know, you take one of the James Bond guys and you make him the villain in this. He's so good at being the villain. Such a like smarmy dude. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are at the top of their game. So that's a fun little cameos. Like there's a Kate Blanchett and Peter Jackson of all people both have like unrecognizable cameos. Did you know that the Santa Claus that stabs Nicholas Angel through the hand is Peter Jackson in a Santa Claus getup? Wild cameo. And then Kate Blanchett is one of the hazmat suit wearing people. Olivia Colman is really good in this. She has a small role. She wasn't like the superstar that she is now. Oh, Adam Buxton is in this, who is a guy that I don't think I've seen him in any other movies. I've only ever seen him in like panel shows. He does lots of podcasts and stuff. Funny guy, entertaining. He's on like, Cats This Countdown and stuff like that. He's a entertaining fellow. He's the guy who gets the church steeple through his head, which is such an incredible death scene. I love how gory this movie gets when it does not need to. I love how different the Simon Pegg and Nick Frost characters are versus Shaun of the Dead. It does not at all feel like, oh, it's the same duo in a different movie. It's the same duo of actors, but it's not the same duo of characters. Their dynamic is completely different. It eventually becomes more in line with their like a whole bromance thing. This movie has so many like iconic moments, like all the stuff with the swan, the montage editing, the chase sequence with like all the fence gag that's in all of the Cornetto trilogy movies. I love the escalation of it, from Shaun of the Dead to Hot Fuzz to The World's End. Really, really great escalation. The shootout at the end, I both love and don't really like the shootout at the end. I feel like it's not shot and edited as well as it could be. Basically, I love everything that happens in the shootout, but I don't love how Wright chooses to present it. This is kind of where like, I love the like instincts he has for action and the way that his action sequences are constructed and what happens in them, but I don't always love how he shoots and edits his action sequences. And that goes for the shootout in Hot Fuzz. I love it conceptually and how like so many characters are involved in this and the way everyone is dispatched and how like everyone involved is an established character that we know from earlier. I love all the different like weapons that get used and the locations that are used, everything about it. It's not shot in a way that's like clear. It's lacking the clarity of like a John Woo shootout, which I feel like is what he's going for. It more has like the choppiness of a like American blockbuster action-y kind of movie, where I guess is where you can see the like the Bad Boys inspiration, for example. Even though I kind of think even like Point Break is much more clear and much more followable. Like there's a lack of geometry. I kind of get nerdy about action, but like I feel like geometry is really important to any action sequence, but especially a shootout where there's like space between the players involved. And I do think that's lacking a little bit, but that's besides the point. That's a small fault in what is otherwise a remarkable movie. So goddamn funny, so entertaining, so memorable and distinctive, and so many iconic moments. I would say all of Edgar Wright's movies, if I was just ranking like his direction, like his work as a director, I'd probably give all of his movies the S tier, if I'm being honest. It's some of the other elements that bring some of his work down a little bit, not all of it. When a new Edgar Wright movie comes out, that's a special occasion. His latest movie being Last Night in Soho was a little bit of a disappointment, but that won't affect how I go into his next movie, whatever it may be. Anyway, thanks for watching. Check out more of my tier lists if you enjoyed this. There'll be a playlist on screen and down in the description. Thanks for watching. So long.